Hi everyone, it's a nice, quick, easy game to begin with. This is Marco versus Min in round one of term 4, 2018. This is played on the 13th of October. Let's just get into it. Okay, I should flip the position. How do I do that? Okay, so this is Marco versus Min. Marco was white, Min was black, and yeah, this was pretty much a slaughter. So let's look at it. E4, E5, F4, King's Gambit. And in this position, black should clearly just take the pawn. I mean, D5 sort of stuff is okay as well. It's a nice little counter gambit, but even just taking the pawn is sort of normal. And King's Gambit's a risky opening, very aggressive, but a bit risky, especially since there's an hour on the clock each. But what black has gone and done and has played the worst thing you can do, F6. Now, I'm always telling students, never, ever, ever push this pawn, this king's bishop's pawn early on in the game, unless it's a specific opening that you know well. Like if your opponent plays d4 and you play the Dutch defense, if you know your lines well, you can push this pawn up. If you don't know the opening, do not push this pawn. You will get smashed. And that's pretty much what happened. White just ripped this off. And in this position, black can't take it back. I don't know what black does here. Maybe knight c6 or something would be, just treat it as a pawn sack would be the best way to play it. But black then made a second mistake. F6 is obviously terrible, but took it back. And now black loses by 4. So this is just an easy win for white. Very instructive win. Queen h5 check. Obviously if g6, the queen takes the e5 pawn with check with a queen fork on the rook and the king. So yeah, black has gone and played king e7, and yeah, it's a forced win. King f7 is the only move. Bishop c4. In this position, black has to throw away another pawn to have any chance of survival. What he played was worse, but here black should play d5 purely to open up the line for this bishop, so the bishop defends f5. So this is what should have been played, and even then black is still losing horribly, and probably, I assume, lost by force anyway. But this gives black a fighting chance to maybe, I don't know, if white makes some serious blunders later on, black might be able to get back in the game. But here he's just made another mistake and just played king g6, and queen f5 check, king here, d3, a bit dodgy on d3. I mean, d3 is fine, it's still winning, but surely d4, control the center would be a much better way to play it, and then control of the e5 and c5 squares might be important if black manages to somehow wriggle out of this mess. d3 is a bit, I don't know, this doesn't seem right to me when you had a chance to play d4. G5 is the only move, and then h4. This is just, it's just terrible for poor black. I'm not sure if black has anything here that he can do. Bishop e7 maybe is still a forced mate for black, isn't it? Because but there, checkmate, game over. Yikes. So what black ended up playing was queen e7, which of course just loses a queen. According to the analysis, I don't have it on infinite analysis. Well, why not? There we go. Now it is. According to this is just an easy win, just with this as well. But what white played was quite sensible. Bishop takes g5 with a bishop fork on the king and the queen, giving the king only one square. King g7. Let's just go back. Can white just win by force here? After king g7, what does Stockfish say? There is a forced mate here with bishop d2 apparently. That's threatening bishop c3. It's quite understandable that white would just take the easy win rather than just having to calculate this whole thing out. So bishop takes g5, king g7, bishop takes e7. It's all over. Yeah, so here, I mean, white played h5. Yeah, much better is obviously something like queen f7, and you know, forcing the king to h6, and then you know, something like g4 threatening g5. It's game over pretty much. That would have been a much quicker way and safer way to win the game. Instead, he's played h5. I'm not sure why. It just allows black to play knight h6 and attack the queen and defend the f7 square and let the rook out. And I mean, white's still winning, but black can put up a bit of resistance and make white have to think at least. d6 was the other move black was thinking, but unfortunately it doesn't guard f7. It chases the queen to where it wants to go. White obviously white took the free bishop, but white could just play this here now, and after king h6, yeah, you've got a forced win with queen f4, king g7, h6 check, knight takes h6, queen takes h6 mate. So white could have won very quickly that way. White instead just grabbed the bishop. It's very easy to get overconfident in a position like this anyway, and you know, just a whole queen up, threatening this, trapping the rook. It's a slaughter. So after knight f6, with a discovered attack on the queen, luckily, well not luckily, but white actually did find a forced win. h6 check, forcing king g6, and then the queen comes back to f5 mate. And that was the end of the game. A very quick one. The only lesson there is right at the very start, f6. Yuck. Now, just to show you how this applies in other situations, imagine if the game had have gone knight f3 and black chose f6. This is another well-known example of someone playing a move which they think is sensible. Oh, I'm defending the center, but leads to a forced loss after knight takes e5. And once again, black can't take the knight back. I guess it's not a forced loss because but black can play something like knight e7, which guards g6. You know, imagine if you tried knight c6 here, that would be absolutely terrible because queen here, and the point of the fact matter is because the knight is guarding g6, you can't play g6 yourself because the knight just takes on g6, and the queen is pinning the pawn to the rook. So something like this, and the queen grabs the rook in h8. You see a similar thing when the bishop is on d3 and this e-pawn's not in the way, and it's guarding the g6 square. The queen check comes out, and you can't play g6 because the bishop, which is now sitting here, sacrifices for the pawn, allowing the queen to grab the rook. So here, you know, the only move is to play something like knight e7, so that the queen here can actually be answered by g6. And, you know, knight takes g6 can then be answered by knight takes g6. But if black doesn't want to be just a pawn down and decides to take back with the pawn, yeah, we see the almost exact same situation. You know, g6 really has to be played here, and the idea is after this, queen takes, the queen grabs the rook. Black has got a bit of counterplay in that he's got this queen check, and you know, maybe the king can, maybe the knight can go to f6. Well, I can't even do that. Maybe the king can hop on f7, and black can get some counterplay having given up the exchange, because you remember white sacrificed his knight to win that rook. But if black doesn't want to lose his rook and tries to go down the same path, you see an almost exact identical situation where once again black has to sacrifice this pawn just so the bishop on c8 is guarding f5, and if he doesn't, oh yuck, death to black. And yeah, d4 check, g5, h4. It's a very common thing. I suspect Marco has seen all this before. You know, every good chess player has seen this exact same way to smash someone who plays an early f6 in these sorts of lines. If he hasn't, then brilliant. You know, well done to him for working all that out and almost finding the perfect moves to destroy black. And yeah, you've got the same thing, the threat of the bishop fork and the threat of the double check with the mate coming on f7, and there's nothing much to be done. You know, the same thing as what I was talking about before, check there, and then mate, and yeah, it's all over. Oops. h4. And yeah, it's not much that can be done. Okay, that was easy. Black just decided, come and checkmate me, and white said, oh, thank you, and the game was over. Hopefully, there's some good lesson there to learn, particularly in the opening. Early f6 asking to be destroyed, and I've been telling students this for a long time, and it's good to see someone capitalize on it in exactly the way that I've described over the years. Okay, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed that. Goodbye.